Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Death. Today we are joined by a guest I'm very excited about today. Her name is Charlotte John. She has lived many lives, has done many things which have involved working in the death space. She's worked in the stroke rehab unit, where she's also encountered patients coming towards the end of life. She has also been involved in national audits with the Home Office. She's also involved in lots of meditation and meditative work to help people deal with bereavement and grief. And more recently, she's been involved in digital transformation for the last 7 years or so. She's got a wealth of experience and some very interesting opinions and thoughts that I would like to explore during today's episode. I really think you'll enjoy this episode. So without further ado, Charlotte John, welcome to the Beyond Death podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Really looking forward to our conversation and chatting with you.
Excellent. So Charlotte, I have sort of introduced you to our listeners today, but tell me in your own words what it is that you do.
I know. It's when you get to my age, it's like not what have I done? It's more like what have I not done? And as you've kind of said there, it's a bit of a cradle to the grave career. It's always been in healthcare. So for the last 30 odd years, that's been my space, starting off on the wards when the kids were small, as you said, stroke rehab, end of life care, then moved on to midwifery. So I was a maternity care assistant on labour ward and running in theatres, and then moved into the mortuary, which again we'll talk a bit more about, but and then, as you say, into digital transformation and a little bit with the Human Tissue Authority, which is quite interesting. That's part of that regulatory and audit that we spoke about.
Okay, so let's just go right back to the beginning and tell me about your experience working with newborn babies.
Yes, absolutely. A lovely part of my career in healthcare. So working on maternity, we saw lots of mums come in, right the way from antenatal clinics, right the way through to birth. Sometimes that was in the hospital setting, sometimes in a home setting as well. And it really was, a different scene from work coming from end of life on the wards of care of the elderly into now it's got like new birth. It's a lovely, midwives are great. They are what we call earth angels. And just to say, I was a maternity care assistant, so I wasn't a qualified midwife, but certainly got to see a lot of the experiences that childbirth can bring. And unfortunately is, something we don't talk about is the stillbirths and the effect, obviously, that devastation of the bereavement towards mums, but also the impact that it has on midwives and all of the care assistants that are involved in that birth.
No, absolutely. I think it's something we don't talk about very often, but something that unfortunately some people go through, and that of course comes with dealing with life afterwards, trying to move on from situations like that. With those experiences that you've had, how has that shaped you into sort of your subsequent careers or things that you went into following on from that?
It's interesting, being in there, it's hard to, I guess, decompartmentalize. On one hand, as carers, as healthcare professionals, we are there to care and to be part of that journey with you. But then there's times like when there's a stillbirth where it's not our grief and we have to kind of step back and almost have no emotion towards that because, we're there to do a professional job. And that's quite hard to kind of mentally deal with sometimes when it comes, time after time. But for me, what I could give back was it's where I started to understand care after death. And for me to be able to take that baby down after it's been with the family, to take him down to the mortuary with love, care and attention, that was how I could kind of give back. That was my part to those parents, that once they've, given their baby over, that actually that care still continues into the mortuary setting. And that's how I ended up being in the mortuary and got to know the guys down there in my local hospital, decided that actually my sense of humor was more suited for down there, but also how I really had an appreciation for that after death care and to make sure that continued.
Absolutely. And I think it's an important role that you're playing in there, because I think quite often, like you say, people are there for the moment where things happen, and then suddenly everyone leaves the room and you're left with, grieving parents or grieving family members. And you're there to provide that care, like you said, after death. Now, tell me about these sort of, I guess, with situations like this, these come with the associated feelings of grief and some mental health associated emotions. Now, what sort of emotions were you witnessing in your experience there? And how did you help these patients or these parents go through, grief?
I think the first thing is that we're all, we all learn or should learn is the stages of grief. And actually, there's not one size fits all when it comes to this. Every situation is unique. Some parents are more prepared for it. Some, obviously, it's a shock of emergency or a trauma birth. For us as healthcare professionals, the best thing we can do is listen and have empathy, but understand that this isn't our grief. And I think that's sometimes really hard as a healthcare professional. This is a parent's grief, and people sometimes don't want to hold their baby. Sometimes they want to spend, hours and have family coming in, and there's no right or wrong to it. I think there's a lot of support, bereavement support out there for parents and families. And especially for dads as well. I think there's a lot of care that goes towards mums in this situation, but sometimes dads can get, left out. And there's some really good support out there for him, for dads as well. And I think whatever journey you're going through, whatever your grief process is, it's unique to you, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve a loss.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on with that description there as well. And of course, sometimes stillbirths are also investigated. Should they have to be investigated? And I guess that's the other side of the coin that requires us to care for parents as they have to go through this process of trying to find answers as to why they had a stillbirth or why they had to go through such traumatic events. And I guess you provide care during that process as well too. I guess then from there, going into the mortuary, you were then involved, I believe, with a national audit. Now, tell me about the national audit with the Home Office. What that involved? I just wanted to know more.
Yeah, I know. It sounds great, doesn't it? Yeah, so it was part of, so obviously a mortuary manager. I trained as an anatomical pathology technologist. So we did postmortems for any unexplained or unexpected sudden death. So they would have a postmortem, they would come through, and that's the reason why you would have them. So not everyone would have a postmortem. Now, everywhere that uses, removes, or stores human tissue has to have a license, and that is governed through the Human Tissue Authority, the HTA. And so I was also a regulations manager for them. And you might remember back, I think, David, it was in the 1990s, the Alder Hay situation, where there was a lot of human tissue and organs found. Well, since then, we went on to, and that's when the HTA program came in, the consent came in for that. So prior to that, there wasn't any regulation in terms of human tissue being taken for postmortem and forensic examination. So again, then in 2009, as part of a HTA audit, we found, again, a lot of unidentified body parts and tissue. And that really formed the basis of this national audit, which was done by the Association of Chief Police Officers. It was an ACPO audit. And we took, I think it was about 2 years, we audited everyone that removed or used or stored human tissue, and found that obviously, before the legislation came in, back in up until the 1960s, we were finding body parts and organs and tissues that were just left in the back of freezers within in mortuaries. And it was so fascinating, for us to see how many pieces due to that lack of evidence or that got lost or had just been stored and not returned back to its loved one or back to the body. And I think we found, forgive me, I don't know, the exact amount, I think it was around 500 significant body parts and organs that were unidentified that hadn't been repatriated back to the body.
Well, that many, wow.
Yeah. And that didn't include, so that it was in 3 categories. Category 1 was hair, skin, nails as part of the forensics. So that wasn't part of that. It wasn't part of like just tissue or small nodes of lung or whatever, organ to be taken. This, we're talking like an arm or a leg or a liver. So it's significant organs and body parts that we found. Yeah.
Gosh, and what was the recommendation from that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes, the recommendation, off the back of that, it was in conjunction with the Human Tissue Authorities. That's where we really stepped up the legislation for the police in terms of taking the forensic teams taking and that more chain of evidence that was needed. And we also did a lot of consent training. So working with police officers and the Metropolitan Police mainly. And then it got widely rolled out is just understanding how to take samples, how to get consent from the family and how to properly document them as well. And I think the problem with this, and it's why I'm in digital transformation now, is that this area is so underserved when it comes to digital that you have to remember everything was written and is written on paper. So you might have the sample going off one way, and then you might have the paper going off, the report going off on another way. And unless they marry up in some way, that's where we found these anomalies and these tissues that just were unidentified.
Gosh, it's all very tragic when you think about it. But like you said, off the back of it, there have been some real transformations in the way we do things currently. So I guess it's one step forward is one way of thinking about it. And then I know that you've also been as part of this national audit stuff that you've done. You've also been involved in investigations of homicides and suicides, etc. Tell me about your experience in that.
This is the macabre part of me now, David. So as I said, anyone that dies unexpectedly or unexplained or sudden needs to have a postmortem, which is on behalf of the coroner. And so that was basically our day job. I did maybe between 4 and 6 postmortems a day. Some of them were from a hospital that comes through, but others were those murders that came through locally, suicides. We lived by the sea, so we had a lot of people wash up on the beach. So many different deaths. There's nothing I don't think that I haven't seen that's happened. And we have a really, people will know we do have an odd sense of humor. We have to down in the mortuary, but I think just to say that once they're on our on the table and we're doing the postmortem, there is the utmost dignity and respect for everyone, because at the end of the day, they're all someone's mum or someone's brother, someone's sister. And that's where that duty of care and also that HTA, the Human Tissue Authority licensing and standards, really ensures that care that the patients get when they're alive is actually still carried through afterwards. And it was an absolute privilege to do some of those. And I guess my specialty was reconstruction. So I would, if someone had been in a road traffic accident and couldn't be viewed by a family, I would, and I had the pieces there, then I would be able to reconstruct skulls. It took me hours, but that's what I would do as well. And another interesting part actually was for a research perspective. So if somebody had donated their brain to science, we would have the team come in and retrieve, I would retrieve the brain for them, and they would come and take that away for research. And again, that's just fascinating that even after death, people are still helping us advance in healthcare.
And I have to say, absolutely fantastic work that you're doing, particularly with the role of reconstruction as well, because like you said, it's already a very traumatic experience for family members, and this work that you're doing is very helpful in making them, at least making it just that little bit more, I guess, palatable for them to experience. So it's really, really fantastic work that you're doing. And I guess like with all the stuff that we've talked about with your experiences and the variety of investigations that you have been involved in or you've come across throughout your career, you must at some point be feeling like you have to let it all out somewhere. Tell me about meditation. Tell me about the things that you do to help you just, you get home and just become Charlotte John, become the Charlotte John that was a child who had aspirations to become, an adult and live the best life. Tell me about what the things that you do that, just remind you that you are still Charlotte John when you come back home.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Some people say to me, I don't know how you do your job. And I would say the same to a surgeon who's, doing heart surgery. I don't know how they could do their job. For me, it wasn't a job, one, but that trauma that you see, I guess that secondary post-traumatic, trauma that you see at the time, I'd say that it doesn't affect me. One day I would be there with a team investigating, doing a post-mortem on a murder victim, and I'd look down at my watch and go, I've got to go, I've got to pick the kids up. And 20 minutes later, I'm in a playground, asking the children where their lunchbox is. It's so different, the world, from within a mortuary to outside the mortuary. And I think the things I've seen should never be seen by anybody. And, I have to take my hat off to the first responders, the ambulance crew, the paramedics and the firefighters that are out there, dealing with this at the scene rather than it coming into me. But for me, I think it's given me a real appreciation of life. Death can come at any point, and every day I wake up and give thanks that I've woken up today. I've made it. And the bits that I guess for me, what help is gratitude is such a big part of my life in terms of my meditation. Sometimes we do suffer, I think as a healthcare professional, we do suffer from compassion fatigue, which is where we just get so used to the trauma or in caring for someone that we can lose the compassion that brought us into that kind of industry in the first place. So I do try, again, loving kindness meditation is a great way to be kind to yourself and be kind to others, even when it's just such a difficult situation. And I think for me, meditation, there's so many things we can do, but sometimes you just need to have a quiet moment and go, do you know what? I'm not okay. And that's okay. And I think once you accept, sometimes it is tough rather than bottling it up all the time. That will go some way to helping you.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on in that. We have to look after ourselves as healthcare professionals or people that work in the death space, because if we can't do that, how are we going to be able to help others around us who are relying on our support? So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that particular front. And then I know with all the work that you've done with in the past, that somehow has led you into this digital transformation type work that you're doing. Now, to a layperson, tell us, what does digital transformation mean?
Well, I guess to usually when I say digital transformation, people hear IT change.
That's exactly what I heard.
Exactly, yeah. And then that brings just an absolute fear of losing your job or not being able to do it, or, AI taking over and making decisions for us. But really it's about how can we improve the way that we deliver patient care, and in the death space, and you'll be very familiar with this, and it is such a transformation, is, we're going from invasive postmortem. So where we are seeing, we're opening up bodies and going into there to find out why there's a cause of death. And that leaves such an external imprint. We put everything back into a body, but the body doesn't look the same for loved ones to view. But now we have got non-invasive postmortems. So this is where we can scan a body, and the impact that has for families is huge. So throughout healthcare, we will see new systems coming in, where we can share data, where we can improve patient safety. But more importantly, how can we understand population health of the future? I think sometimes, David, the NHS is very reactive to healthcare and the problems that the population are facing. But how can we use digital technology and innovation to help us understand what, I guess, personalized medicine for the future looks like? And that's the really interesting part for me. And the mortuary, the pathology, those areas are so underserved when it comes to digital transformation. I mean, we're still in some mortuaries writing on a whiteboard and filling out a ledger. Now there's so much security risk there. And that's why the HTA is so important in making sure that there's things in place to prevent that. But if we could just use digital technology and innovation a little bit better in these areas, I think we would have such a huge impact in the, after death care space, and then into, funerals as well. I think that's why I'm in digital transformation, is because there's a need for, I guess, the voice of the underserved. I've been there, I've lived it, I've worked it, I've seen it, I know the barriers and challenges. It's like, now how can I bridge that gap and bring in technology to make it better?
And that's absolutely spot on. And I think that you said about sort of you're right, the mortuary is often one of the last places in a hospital people look at, yet it's probably one of the most important places, because it's where people go to see the loved ones, get some answers, get the closure once someone has passed away. And I think it's unfortunate that we always or sometimes neglect that part of the hospital, and also forget to sort of shine a light on the people that actually work in there and do a fantastic job. So I think what you're doing is fantastic with the digital transformation in that particular space as well. So Charlotte, I guess my next question then to you is about your day-to-day job. So talk me through a typical day currently for you right now. What would you wake up, let's say a typical week perhaps, what would a typical week look like for you?
I mean, other than talking with you, David, which is obviously the highlight of my week this week.
That is the correct answer. That is the correct answer.
For me, I want to it's more about thought leadership as well. So my day job is around helping suppliers of technology understand the landscape, look at what their value proposition is, and kind of like map out a patient journey or a clinical pathway to understand where they can bring benefit to the healthcare profession. And then I also work with the NHS and other suppliers, public health, around understanding what their needs are. And that's the bit I love, because being, I guess, 20 years frontline, I miss that direct making a difference with people. So now what I do is I get to speak to stakeholders. So whether they're clinicians, they're nurses, healthcare professionals, Mary on reception, whoever it is, when it comes to digital transformation and we're putting in a new system or a new piece of technology, is really understanding what are the barriers and challenges they are facing now. What does good look like for them? And, really understand what their fears are towards this resistance to change, because our workforce, they are so having to deal and adapt to this relentless wave of change. Everything from, since COVID, it has just been, change after change in terms of the work and how we deliver care. So for me, it is really about understanding what that is and then putting it back into a way that anyone can understand. So if you're a supplier of technology, what does that mean to you? If you're a user of the technology, what does that mean to you? And that's really my day job, which is great because I get to speak to so many different departments within an NHS organization. I'm doing a lot right now in meditation, so supporting frontline staff with adapting to change, stress and anxiety within the workplace, and really helping them understand some of those things that we talked about, David, around loving kindness, gratitude, that compassion fatigue, and how we deal with the stress that we find. Because it's not just our doctors and nurses that are part of that. When we're delivering bad news, it's someone like yourself who might see on a scan that negative result that someone's going to have to deliver, but you already know that, and that's part of your trauma now. The maternity care assistant that clears up after an operation or a trauma in A&E, these are all people that we don't really think about how death impacts so many people within our healthcare. So for me, that's why I split my time between digital transformation and meditation and mindset coaching for people on our front line.
Yes, that leads me on to quite nicely onto one of my final questions, which is, I guess, what is a common misconception about what it is that you do, Charlotte?
I'd say from a mortuary perspective, the common misconception is that my role in a mortuary is like working for silent witness. My job in a mortuary, and anyone will tell you, everyone says to me, "Oh, is it like silent witness?" No, silent witness does not give you the smells or some of the things that we have to deal with. So that's a misconception. Another one is that a mortuary is haunted. Again, in all the mortuaries I've been in, that's a misconception.
I think
that's not true, no.
Revelation.
But I think on a serious note, I think the misconception is that digital is the change. And, I think digital is an enabler to change. People are still the success of digital transformation. We can put in all the tech we like, but actually it's not going to make that much difference if we don't have the people using it. So for me, I want to say the misconception is that, people do need to be on that journey with you, that are on the front line, that are going to be using it. So we really understand what it is they need the technology to do. And it's not, like I say, it's not just putting in a new system and expecting it to work.
Excellent. And then I guess my final question to you, Charlotte, then is, so what's next? I mean, you're already doing so much, you've already done so much, but dare I ask, what is next on the cards for you?
What is next? That's a good question. I think for me, it's about influence and impact now. I think healthcare is changing. It's adapting so fast. And how can we ensure that our workforce is adapting to the change that we're making? Because sometimes it's not always the right change that we're making, the right change or the right outcome or the right impact that we want. And so for me, I'll be working very much now on looking at how we can use the data that digital technology is providing us to make sure that we are looking towards the future in the way we deliver healthcare, but also making sure that we are supporting our frontline workforce really develop that resilient mindset when we're adapting to change. So they're my two things. It kind of comes all in together. It's kind of what I'm doing now, but more on a bigger scale now. I think it's so important.
Watch the space then. So then I guess I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you today, Charlotte. So I know we've touched on some pretty heavy topics today, particularly at the beginning of the podcast episode. So we have touched on some pretty heavy things, but it's important we discuss them just to open up the conversation around it, because it is happening. And when the more we talk about it, the more people can feel comfortable talking about their experiences, and also be open about the grieving process as well. I think you're doing fantastic work, particularly with the meditation work that you're doing with healthcare professionals in particular. So I actually personally want to say thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And I think you've also done fantastic work, particularly in the past with all the stuff with the national audit, with the Human Tissue Authority as well, because I think that has really transformed, or at least has helped to transform the way in which we do things. So thank you so much, Charlotte, for joining me today on this podcast episode. I have thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. And today, this might be the end of my discussion with Charlotte, but it's certainly not the end of the conversation surrounding what happens beyond death. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you, David. It's been an absolute pleasure.